And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hi folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Tiny Towns. AEG has really progressed as a company. It's really interesting to see where their games have gone. Last year they released a game called Space, which was really easy for everyone to play, rolling dice and collecting resources. A very simple game that was one of my most played, if not the most played game of the year. So I was very interested that they have another game kind of in this same line. Peter McPherson has made a game here called Tiny Towns, which when someone asks me, they're like, how do you describe Tiny Towns? I'm like, it's bingo-esque, which is kind of, I think, the best way to describe it, because someone's going to be calling out a resource. Everyone's placing that resource on your board and trying to match patterns. Now, there are a lot of pattern matching games that are out there, but usually they involve one big board that everyone's working on and you're trying to build patterns in it. In this one, you each have your own player board. Whatever, here's how it plays. At the beginning of each game, you're going to go through decks of cards and draw one of each of these cards and place it face up in the middle of the table. You can also pick a set. There's a starting set that they mentioned. Each player is also going to get two of these purple tower cards. You don't have to do this if you're playing a beginner game, but you probably should. And then you take one of them and put this in your hand. Each player is also going to get one of these, and I should mention that there's a cottage card out here, but this card is in every game. So these are the different buildings. There are 7 different buildings that can be built over the course of the game, 8 if you include the tower. And then there is a whole pile of resources here. Each of those resources stands for a typical resource that you might have: stone, brick, wood, glass, wheat, etc. One player goes first. That player is given a start marker, and they're going to pick a resource. So maybe in this case, they pick grain. Although you're eventually just going to say yellow. So they say yellow, and everybody is going to place a yellow on their board. You can place it anywhere you want on your board, but you must place it on your board. And then someone else might say blue, and then someone else might say red. And look, lo and behold, no, I built that the wrong way. So hopefully I would have put the yellow there and the blue there, in which case I match this card. Now, if you match a card that's on the table, you take those cubes off, and where one of those cubes was, you'll place a building of that type. So here I put a cottage down. Now, when you put a building down, you can no longer put cubes in that spot. You also don't have to do it. So maybe I have, for example, 2 reds and a blue here, but that's not what I'm trying to build. I want to build this one here. So I'm trying to get 2 grays, another red, and a brown, and now I can build my factory here. And so players are going to be all building different things. You're probably not going to be building the same buildings as everybody else after a while. And also each player is going to call it whatever resource they want. As an alternative, you can also take this deck of cards here and draw cards from this deck, and everyone puts that out for the 2, and then you can put out a resource of your choice. Then you draw 2 more, and then you put out a resource of your choice. So that's an alternate way to do it. If at any point you have cubes out for your tower, which is secret, you're like, hey, I built my tower. You take the cubes off and you put your tower on the board. Sometimes when you build a tower, it will give you something that you can do right away. But like this one here, for example, says immediately place a building on any empty square in your town. But usually they're just going to be worth points at the end of the game. See, that's why you're placing everything here is for points. And every point, everything's going to be different. Cottages are always the same. They're 3 points if they're fed. These buildings, the farm buildings essentially, are going to feed the cottages in different ways. For example, this one here feeds all the buildings in the 8 squares that surround that farm, while this one here feeds any 4 buildings in town. This one here feeds all buildings in the same row and column, so they're going to be different. Wells are going to get points for being adjacent to stuff. So this millstone here gets 2 points if it's adjacent to a farm or a yellow building. The church-type buildings usually give you points for where they are. This one gives you 1 point for each church that's in a corner of your town. Markets, this one here gives you a point for each market in the same row or column. This cottage here, well, we already mentioned the cottages. Taverns, you get points based on how many taverns you built. So if I built 5 taverns, I'm going to get 20 points. And factories often let you have a special ability. This says when you have a factory, place a resource on it. You'll notice that the factories have spots to put resources on them. And then whenever someone says that resource, I can pick a different resource instead. And there's, the towers do all sorts of things. I can place all future buildings on any empty square in my town, replace 2 buildings with any other building. This gets 2 points for each unique adjacent building type. So there's all sorts of towers, 1 point for each adjacent cottage, 2 points if it's next to another well. Here I can treat these as wild resource for future buildings. There's 1 point plus 1 for each of these tailors that's in the 4 center squares in your town. So all sorts of things. So players are going to keep going. Now eventually, since you have to put a cube out, there will come a point where you put a cube out and you can't replace it with a building, or you replace the final square in your thing with a building. No, that's not possible. You're just going to have to fill it up, and maybe you can't build any more buildings, in which case you're done. And then the turns keep going until everyone is finished. Once everyone is finished, you're going to score each type of building until you get a final score. So in this particular game, the factories didn't have any scores, and you can see the cottages and all the different things that scored. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most points is the winner. And sometimes scores can be very wild. Like in this game, this loser named Tom only scored 3 points, because you do lose a point for each space on the board that you only have a cube in and don't have a building in. And this person did not get enough points through other methodologies. That's pretty much it. That's how you play Tiny Towns. Lots of wooden pieces in this game, and I like to point out that these plastic containers don't come in the game. I just added them myself just for ease. I mean, the resources are just cubes, and this hammer is neat, but we gave up passing this around the table first player, kind of fiddly. But I like the buildings. They're all different colors, but they're also very different shapes, so they're very easy to tell apart. They look really good on the table. And while these boards are, fairly boring 4x4 boards, once they have the buildings on, they look pretty good. I really enjoy that the cards are nice and huge. They're good quality cards. They have nice pictures on them, and they're very easy to see exactly what colors are needed to build the grid, whatever they're going to be. And they're different for each one, so you never know what color might be useful in a town or not. And then the score pad is nice and big and colorful, and I'm probably going to laminate mine because I think we'll run out of them fairly quickly. But overall, great components. Now here's the interesting dichotomy of Tiny Towns that I find fascinating. One is that the game is extremely easy. I tell everyone how to play. I can teach this game in just a few minutes. Here, grab the resource, put the resource on your board, you get the resources down, you take them off, put the building on. Super easy, everyone can play it. Secondly, it's really hard. Now I know it sounds odd, but it's the truth. It's easy to play and easy to jump into. You can really mess yourself up in this game by you're like, okay, I got these resources. Here's a building. Put this building here. Oh, because I put that building there, now I can't build stuff there. Oh, no. In fact, there's a rule in this game called the cave where essentially you can take 2 cubes that are called out and place them next to your board, and you don't have to put them on right away for beginners. And I'm telling you, I feel like I'm pretty good at spatial games sometimes, and this game kicked my butt at least the first couple times because just how that worked out. But I like the game. I keep coming back to it, and not everyone, but almost everyone I played it with enjoyed it also. The game's is 45 minutes on here. It's probably most of the time going to be faster than that, 30 minutes. But it's this game where everyone's involved all the time. You got red, everyone's like red, everyone puts on their board, everyone done. Okay, next. Green, and then someone's like, or gray. Someone's like, why did you place gray? We don't need another gray. Well, I needed a gray. Now, I will say that it is immensely more difficult to play this game with more players because you have less control of calling out the colors. And in fact, I would highly suggest that if you're playing with 5 or 6 players to use the deck of cards, because every third cube, you at least get to pick the color that's going out. And so that gives a little bit more control, I feel, with more players, because if we were playing with 6 players, for example, and it goes around the table, there's going to be 5 colors you don't get to pick. While in a 4-player game, you have more control. That 3-point score was a 6-player game for that loser player named Tom. This is a game that I feel is going to be a big hit. I feel like a lot of people are going to be playing this at conventions because it's so easy. You call it out. It's going to appeal to the people who like roll and write games. It's going to appeal to people who like bingo-esque games like Rise of Augustus and things like that. But it's also puzzly for people who like heavier games. You can sit there and really kind of think this out. Now, it's not very long and drawn out. You put a cube there, but you got to sit there and go, okay, I can't build all the buildings. You just can't. So what buildings am I going to do? These buildings, you have different points. In fact, one of the buildings I enjoyed, if you build an odd number, you got negative points. If you build an even number, you got positive points. So you're trying to build up to get that huge positive point number, but not have an odd number before the game ends. And if you only concentrate on that building, you're giving up points for other things. The towers help a little bit because everyone has a chance to build a tower that no one else has, and it gives you like a little bit of uniqueness against everyone else. And that also helps because I know someone will sit there and go, why can't you just copy your neighbor? Well, if you have the towers in play, you really can't because their tower is going to be different than yours. But even without towers, when I play without towers, people just all did different things. Some people said, ooh, wells are easy. I can build a bunch of those, but they don't work really well unless I build other buildings. So it's a neat concept. It's expandable. They could easily add more cards to it. But as it is, there's a lot of replayability. You're going to have a different set of cards every time, and different players trying different things. This is going to be a cool gateway game that's going to be played by a lot of people this year. I enjoy it, and I think a lot of people are going to agree with me on Tiny Towns. Dice Tower Judgment, excellent!